We want to thank Brandon, obviously, for joining us as our guest speaker today. As we mentioned before, this is our Series 3 driving engines, and this is our last for this year that we've done via Zoom. Normally we are in person for this, and obviously we've had a great turnout in past years, 150 plus for these events. So it's been a little different doing Zoom. But we appreciate it. We kind of came up with an idea to just kind of see how certain aspects were dealing with COVID. We obviously did one on retail, we did one on restaurants, had guest speakers, and now we're into resorts and lodging. And Brandon is obviously an executive at IDM Hospitality Management, and he is also on the board with the Wisconsin Hotel Lodging Association. So we thought he would be a perfect candidate to be our guest speaker today. So Brandon's gonna go through and tell us a little bit about himself, and then we've got a few questions that I will go through and ask. We'll have some Q&A at the end of this for anybody that does have a question for Brandon. But I do wanna thank the Chambers. This is in collection with WASITA and then our 6 chambers. This is an event that we put on to basically as a benefit for membership. It's an additional opportunity to reach out to speakers and guests that can come on and talk about various topics. So we've been running this for 3 years now, and it's been really successful. So we want to thank the chambers as well. And we will, hopefully, with everything going on, next year, fingers crossed, we'll be back to in person, but we will continue this on, for future years. So Brandon, if you want to introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about, we want to thank Brandon too, because he's in the middle of obviously opening up multiple properties with IDM Hospitality Management. So Brandon's maybe a little jet lagged. He's been traveling to 3 different properties. So Brandon, if you could take it away and let us know how you're doing.
Well, good morning, and thank you for that introduction. Thank you also for the built-in excuse of jet lag, just in case one of my answers goes straight off the rails this morning. I can always go back to that and say, hey, jet lag, it makes sense. As Sarah mentioned, I am not only an executive committee member with Wisconsin Hotel Lodging Association, but I'm on National Government Affairs with American Hotel Lodging. Also sit on the board for Illinois, Minnesota, Iowa, and Missouri, and their lodging associations as well. So really stay busy in that association side of our business as well. The day job, however, is as vice president for IDM Hospitality, and we focus on independent and boutique properties throughout the country. By the probably end of Q2 next year, we'll be at 15 properties nationwide. We'll be back, hopefully, post-COVID here to close to 1,000 associates in our portfolio throughout all of our properties. So very excited for that, very excited to be here. I recently, with my wife, moved back to the Geneva Lakes area. I've had a couple of stops in my career in Walworth County, both at Grand Geneva and also Lake Lawn Resort, so spend a little bit of time in those 2 locations in my hospitality journey, if you will. So really excited to be able to talk with all of you today. So thank you for that opportunity.
Thanks, Brandon. Okay, so I guess, we obviously kind of went through some of the questions and so forth that we wanted to address, but we want to stay more positive. That's kind of our goal for this, but we do want to know kind of what a brief synopsis, I guess, of what the resorts and hotels that you've seen are experiencing with COVID. We know that the travel industry obviously is hugely affected by this. So it's kind of a 2-part question. If you can tell us a little bit about, whether properties, you've had that have had to close, or, if they're bouncing back fairly well. And then are you being able to get any kind of funding too? How is, so dire straits, and then we'll go positive. So
I was going to say, let's start with the doom and gloom first, get that out of the way, and then we'll move forward, right? And I know that you have a really good industry friend and a close friend of mine, Chris Hilmer from WRA, on part of the series as well, and she probably shared the doom and gloom facing the restaurant side as well. So from the lodging side, let me get that piece out of the way, and let me start at a more macro level. when you look globally, our industry, specifically in lodging, has now lost over 4 million jobs nationwide, or I'm sorry, globally. Nationwide, that number is now over 2.2 million, and nobody is safe from that. Hilton, Marriott, IHG, just recently, about a week and a half ago, the big news about MGM Resorts. To put these numbers in perspective, MGM Resorts alone, if you took the city populations of, minus Lake Geneva, the next basically 2 through 4 of populous cities in Walworth County, all of those people would have been let off of their job just through MGM Resorts. Those numbers are staggering. 4 out of 10 hotels in the country still have not reopened. Now, if we kind of work down a little bit more to our state level, let's get that doom and gloom out of the way, but let's talk about the realities as well. The state is really cut into a couple locations, and what I mean by that is Door County, Lake Geneva, and pretty much the rest of the state, because those 2 locations have seen a very divergent approach and numbers in tourism as of late coming out of the first wave of COVID. So right now for WHNLA, we put out a survey recently to members and non-members alike within the lodging community within our state. 47% of those respondents said that without additional funding, they will be forced to close the doors within the next 12 calendar months. To put it even more on a granular side, 25% of them said that they only have 6 months left of operational funds to make this work without additional, government grant or subsidies. The numbers are real and the impact is real. So the 2 anomalies in our great state have been Lake Geneva and Door County. Lake Geneva, of course, has seen the influx, as we normally do annually, from our friends from the south, right? Coming up from Illinois. Door County has seen a lot of staycations from Wisconsin residents as they head up north, right? To just get out of the rigmarole of what's going on in their daily lives, just for that break. But when we really think about what that outlook is, and I think we'll touch on this a little bit later as well, we're looking at Q3 of next year before you're really starting to see, on a more macro level, hopefully any type of gain in our industry. We're coming out of just over a decade of record revenues, record occupancies. And while the brands have always had their standards of, hey, you spend this amount of money and we take this and you put this in the bank, Wisconsin is home, in Walworth County especially, some of the best independent lodging resorts anywhere, not just in our state, but anywhere. You know, I had mentioned about Grand Geneva, the Abbey, Lake Lawn, Geneva Inn, the Cove. I mean, you have all of these just great independents that had to make decisions over the last decade. Do we put money in the coffers and put it away? Do we reinvest into our businesses? And those coffers are now dry. And as the continued job loss occurs and the economic impact continues, there's some real, very interesting decisions that need to be made on survivability on many of our businesses. That's the doom and gloom. Let's shift off of that. So I had mentioned specifically about Lake Geneva. There are a number of resorts that I've spoken with their GMs, their directors of revenues, just obviously through WHNLA, that have actually seen record months and record days of occupancy and revenues in Lake Geneva. This is great news, especially when you're coming out of a truncated spring season, right? And we all know that we have X number of weeks in the summer to make the vast majority of our budgets and get those monies into the bank accounts to survive the winter. Now, Visit Lake Geneva, this group as a whole, all of you, the Winterfest, everything has been put in play to get us through those shoulder seasons, right, in the winter in Lake Geneva and Walworth County. But that summer is where we really get the safety net. So from an economic standpoint, it's been great to see the influx of people back. There's a lot of medical and political roads we could go down of what that looks like and how many people feel. But the industry as a whole is in a tough spot. We just need to hold on for probably that next 6, 10, 12 months. But you do have these local pockets of success stories. And that's really, whether we're doing it from a state level at WHNLA or a national level at AHNLA, those are the stories we're trying to find and really spotlight. So that would be the first half of your question. The second half is a little bit more political, but it is on a positive path right now. So PPP funding, idle loan funding was critical for so many businesses to survive. But there were challenges, and there still remain challenges. $1.4 billion still sits in the coffers at the national level for PPP funding that's just locked right now that people can't get to. We also saw during the initial PPP funding, there wasn't really that caveat that you had to experience financial hardship to receive money, right, from the government. We saw those stories in the news and in the newspapers about large companies getting PPP funds while mom and pop entrepreneurial businesses couldn't touch anything. It's a challenge. So where do we sit now? Well, I think as a couple of you know on this call, I spent a great deal of time early in my career in Washington, D.C., getting to work for two administrations, one Republican, one Democrat administration in the White House. When I see the amount of traction that's happening right now, generally where there's smoke, there's fire. And we're getting close to the election, which is really hastening a lot of things in DC right now. But really, you saw the news break last night that Speaker Pelosi has this $2.2 trillion plan she'd like to put forth. There's some infighting right now in Washington, D.C. specifically on the left with the Democrats on what they want to see. The Republicans have come out and said, we're hoping for $650 million to $1 trillion. That's where we want to sit. And it's just crazy I joke, us normal people, that $1 trillion isn't that big of a gap when we talk about DC politics, right? And when you're starting to see some movement from the White House and on Capitol Hill, hopefully we're starting to get somewhere. So we do anticipate on Thursday of this week, some type of plan to hit the floor in the House for COVID relief. This is looking at reinstituting stimulus checks, the one-time stimulus checks, which would now be two-time stimulus checks, the reinstatement of the additional $600 unemployment. Both are passion projects for the left. We are looking at release of PPP funding. That's being pushed by the right. So I believe there are things coming. Now, if I was a betting man, I'm only at about 60-40 right now that it has enough juice to pass the House and the Senate to get done, okay? But we go back to those percentage points, and you've heard it now in retail, hotel lodging, and restaurants and food and beverage. Timeliness of additional COVID relief is of the utmost importance. There are a lot of things going on in DC right now. The Supreme Court obviously taking precedent right now. We have the first presidential debate tonight, the election coming up. There's a lot moving as we close in on the election. This is paramount for so many small businesses. And if I could just add one more thing, Sarah. Mm-hmm. Our county, Walworth County, which I can say, again, proudly I'm a resident of, our county is home to so many stories of first generation men and women who have started businesses. We have the historic stories of the Lake Lawns, of the Grand Genevas, of all those established businesses as well. How much of a shame, regardless of where you land on the political spectrum, the shame that we would lose these businesses because of politics back and forth. So regardless of what side of the aisle you fall on, get with your local officials, get with your state officials, get with your U.S. Senator, Tammy Baldwin, Ron Johnson. They still have their full staffs employed. They're responding and reading through all of these pieces of mail from their constituents. Tyler August is a huge supporter for us on a state level. Reach out to these men and women and tell them your story, and having the chambers and Waseda and everyone find those stories of your members and get that out. Being the government guy, right, in Madison and DC, I can tell you we listen to these stories, we hear them, and they make a difference.
Thanks, Brandon. That covered actually fantastic, covered several questions that I had. So that was
Sorry.
Well done. No, it's okay. So given that you are in the thick of obviously quite a few properties with the company that you do work for, in addition to all of the other associations that you're involved in, we went through this obviously with retail and restaurant, but with Wisconsin Hotel Lodging, I know we've gone on the sites and they've done a really nice snapshot of steps to take, you know, how they prepared for COVID, you know, the social distancing, the signage, the hand sanitizer, you know, resources that they've reached out to, that type of thing. Just let us know how some of your properties not only have either been able to retain staff, whether maybe you've been doing a little job shadowing or they've been, you know, kind of thrown to various departments. Maybe they've, you know, you've been utilizing your staff to the fullest, and other steps you've taken just from a guest perspective in terms of making them feel more comfortable to travel, you know, whether it's, you know, specials, whether it's, I know it's kind of a big full question, but we love having that snapshot of like, this is what we did to be able to make guests feel comfortable coming in, as well as the employees for that matter. So.
Yeah, so two very different tracks there, right? One internal with the associates and one external. Let me focus on the internal, right? Because I miss the days, right, when cross-training used to just be a cool thing because someone wanted to learn something, right? Now cross-training is basically the survival mode of maintaining your expenses with the limited labor coming in. And I'm sure a ton of operators on this call or that will hear the recording will agree that the cross-utilization of our associates is paramount to us being able to be open and stay open. I was very disappointed, and it lands on me in my role, but pre-COVID in our hotels nationwide, we were just at about 875 associates. And with these new openings, we were right there on track to be at 1,000. And at peak hit of COVID, nationwide, we were down to 317.
Oh.
And as someone who has the oversight of the HR side as part of my role, that's a moment in my professional career I'll never forget, right? Is sitting there and looking at warn letters and really taking in the gravity of the decisions that had to be made. And we're a company that likes to know, and our executives, we all know the names of every single associate in our hotels. And it's a personal story. It's not just a letter you hand out, right? It's, you know, the effect on the family. And we were not alone, right? Everybody was forced to make those type of decisions. But as low as that day was, the moment that we got probably about 75 to 90 days, it was dependent on the property, 75 to 90 days into the pandemic, and we were able to start bringing people back. Again, in modified roles. Could that front desk agent also pick up a bartending shift because they used to bartend a few years ago and that they like to do that and there's some cash there? Absolutely, that occurred. And it all starts though with the comfort training, and this is cross both of your associates and your guests, right? The human psychology of how we approach business has fundamentally changed because of COVID. I can count how many times that you would run a conference or an event and you would try to hide those sanitizers, right? In this cool little custom wood box or something. And people would be like, oh, hey, it's there. Now, if you don't have 3 sanitizer stands within the radial 10 feet of somebody, the perception is you're not doing the right things. And I think what's very challenging for us as operators is the guidance changes every week, right? As we know more about COVID-19, specifically the virus itself, but as we learn what the demographics really come down to of our guests and trying to find the balance. Let's not kid ourselves. In every hotel, you're still going to have people that are one way or the other. They believe in the mask mandate. This is what we need to do. Stay 6 feet away from me. Don't come close to me. That's my belief. And then you have people that just want to come up and hug you and do all those things, and it doesn't matter. I still like to think the majority of us land somewhere in the middle, right? Mm-hmm. That there are days where I'm just like, hey, get away from me because I heard you hacking up a lung as you were 10 feet behind me. And then there are like, I miss being able to shake somebody's hand. Yeah, the fist bump's cool. The elbow thing's cool. I've watched very uncoordinated people try to do the foot tap, and then they like trip one another, and it becomes comical. But those are the type of things, as we learn this new normal, that really come into how we operate our hotels. As you open the fitness center, and now you may only have a 4-person capacity, and you can use every treadmill, and you have to close it down 2 to 3 times a day for deep cleaning and sanitization. We started, the best practice when this all started and hotels started to reopen was, well, you needed 72 hours after a guest checked out before you could check somebody back in that room. Well, if you have a massive property, you could do that. If you have a small B&B, or if you have a mid-sized property in that 50 to about 105 range, you can't even open. And if you're already struggling to not just make money, but make payroll, there were so many of these guidelines when it first came out that was very difficult. But we all did it because we wanted to somehow get back to normal, bring jobs back. And you know, at the end of the day, our industry and hotel and lodging and really tourism overall is the nomenclature word touch points. And if there's not a worse word you could use during COVID, it's touch points, right? And how do you make a guest stay special? It's all these touch points. So when you have to modify how you're not only speaking with a guest, right? I think the pre-stay communication digitally is so critical. Setting the expectation of what your property has, what's open, what's not open, what you need to be aware of, what you're going to experience in the public space. Digital marketing 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago was like, hey, we need to dump money into e-commerce, and it was a fight, right, in a budgeting meeting. Mm-hmm. But now you see that's how we're going to communicate. From a food and beverage standpoint, I'm not sure if Chris touched on it, but digital menus, right? So from an operations standpoint, having a in your hand paper menu is super formal, and it's kind of icky. So having the QR codes, you know, touching with your phone and going that route, we've instituted that in all of our restaurants throughout the portfolio. PPE, and ensuring that, you know, whether, regardless of what department you're in, I need you to feel safe and feel comfortable and that we're doing the right thing. So having those checklists, and it all started with modified team meetings, right? How can we get a team of 100 in the room? Well, you can't anymore, at least not right now. But can you have a little bit more of a personalized touch point with individual teams or pockets of? Absolutely. Hear what they're asking for, hear those concerns, and how do we move forward? Those are all steps from an internal side while balancing your guest needs side as well. But it's a moving target. And I think that if you ask this question in the next 6 months, probably 6 months after cold, flu, COVID, RSV season, I'd be really interested to get a group of operators and hear now how we're trying to do it as we hit the winter months as well.
Thanks, Brandon. That's actually a really good suggestion. Derek, if you want to make a note, we may want to have a follow-up, you know, again, with our retail speaker and restaurant, and then Brandon, have you as well as some of the other resort operators, GMs and so forth, to do kind of a, this is where we're at now. I guess one of the last questions we have before we open it to anybody else that has questions is, obviously you've answered everything exactly how we were hoping that you would. We're kind of wondering now, like you had mentioned, with flu season, with all of this coming up, you know, cases in Wisconsin increasing and yada, yada, you know, schools and whatnot, universities. We're wondering how, with going into, we don't want to call it our slow season, but the off season, I guess, for some resort hotels, with being the winter months, travel is not as high. What are you doing to kind of draw guests, you know, to the properties? Like you had mentioned, obviously, you know, Lake Geneva and Door County, we've seen in talking to other properties that, you know, people aren't looking to fly somewhere. They are looking to travel. We know, we were just in Lake Geneva yesterday. We know when it is extremely busy. It was crowded beyond belief this weekend. And so we hope to obviously see that continue on, because they may not want to get on a plane and travel somewhere, and they may want to just take that drive. Anything that you're doing from a advertising, promotional, what have you, to encourage. Obviously, we know we're limited with events too. The chambers, we've all struggled with events. Do it, don't do it. We, like you said, you're looking at it in completely different ways. A lot of things, we're having the events because we want people to come out. Businesses want it because it will help to draw some more traffic to their businesses to survive. But the hands-on kids activities, touching activities are all being looked at completely different. Not completely gone, but doing them in a different way. So I guess the question is, going into the off-season months, typically the next, couple, what are you looking at, or what are you doing to try and attract more visitors for your properties?
Yeah, and it's a broad answer because we operate in many different areas. And if I was to sum it up, it is trying to define what is so hyper local to those specific properties that's your differentiator to get somebody to come out. We also understand that outdoor activities, if you can do them correctly, in the sense of someone drives up and doesn't see 1,000 people congregated and then doesn't even get out of their car because they're like, yeah, I'm not sure about this, right? That's why I think of, the Winterfest event, or Sky Circus on Ice over in Delavan. When you can do an outdoor event that is unique to your area. Door County, for us, we have 2 properties in Door County. One is at the entrance of a state park. One is right on the snowmobile trail. These are activities that people can get out and about with family or as individuals and feel safe. Put maybe an extra mask on or ski goggles. I've seen that already in Colorado when I was out there, because it's snowing out there already, which is crazy. But for our property in Minnesota, you're right on the Mississippi River. What can you do to leverage that space and that public space? And family events are huge. And I know that that's a dangerous game in the marketing world, because if you have this family focus, you already are alienating some of your potential guest demo, right? But for us, what we're finding that has already had great traction in central Wisconsin, we have a property in Wausau, we have a property in Marshfield. We're finding local events that we're partnering with chambers and DMOs and children's museums and bringing things outside and spacing it enough, whether it's in a community park. Listen, I don't know of anybody or any entity that does not want to see people happy and congregate in a safe manner, right? Even the most hardened medical officials will say, get outside if you can do it safely, right? Sitting indoors is not good from a mental health standpoint. It's not good from an economic standpoint. If there's no money being spent anywhere in our state, we're in trouble. So it's those type of things, Sarah, that I think are so critical. And I know this isn't a PSA by any stretch for chambers and associations like WRA and WHNLA or DMOs, but if there was ever a time for you as a business operator to invest and engage with those associations and those entities, now is the time. And life is good when we're paying these associations and organizations just to kind of go along, right? When things are good. This is the time where these associations really make a difference, and find a way to partner with them. I'm obviously biased with you and Steph and Chris and a great team that I've been able to work with in the past. I know your passion for the men and women of our great county. You guys want to make a difference. Let us engage from a business side, and that's really what we're trying to do, is leverage the private business sector to partner with city and municipalities that want to see things go and see events and make some things happen. But it's all about how do you do that and still maintain the hyper local feel that will draw people in to do a staycation within that comfort radial ability that they find themselves in. So that's really how we've approached it. We've been pretty successful. We haven't quite had that feel here in our southern states of where we operate yet, because it's already 80 some degrees outside here where I am today and sunny, and no one's thinking about winter here yet, but I know back home, when I was home for a few days this past weekend, it was cold and rainy, and I'm like, oh, it's time, right?
Did
So
you mean a few hours? Weren't you just
it
traveling to
felt
4
like
properties, right?
it felt like a few hours, but no, I'm
Yeah,
excited to spend some more time at home, hopefully soon.
awesome. Thank you, Brandon, so much. We appreciate it. Is there anything else that you may not have touched on that you'd like to share with us? I know you covered a lot, and we have a shorter time frame. We do this because we want to make sure that everyone can get back to their jobs, and we've been, kind of cut it back a little bit. So
Yeah, there was a lot of ground covered. We could talk for hours on PPP and idle funding and the true economic sense of what's happening in the county and the state and everything. But I think the most important thing I kind of touched on just there at the end, the engagement of associations and your chambers, and really bringing economic life back to our area, and engage, regardless of what side of the aisle you're on.
mm-hmm.
Our neighbors, great men and women, great families, whether they're first generation, multi-generational businesses, need our help. And even if you're struggling to make ends meet, understand that, help the community, and let's keep moving forward.
I have to give a shout out to our one of our fearless leaders, Mr. Derek, with the Walworth County Economic Development Alliance. People don't necessarily always know. I mean, he's really instrumental in doing a lot of this, obviously, for us. That's why we include him as part of our chambers and everything, pretty much everything. But I don't think everyone really reaches out as much as they should. Whether it's Derek obviously has a newsletter that goes out. There are job opportunities, things like that. So, businesses need to reach out to them as well, because we just, in going through this, there are people that will contact us saying, hey, I'm looking for a job. I'm looking for this. I need help. How do I fill out these grants? How do I do this? And it's been a really big learning experience, obviously, for all of us. Even though we weren't considered essential, we were probably working harder during the time of not having our doors open, trying to help. And so I just kind of want to put a shout out and a thank you, because obviously Derek, just being able to put these together, and the resources that he has and the staff and everything too, we couldn't do what we do, obviously, without him too. And he's very modest and shy, and of course he's just kind of sitting there going, yeah, but he really, we really, really appreciate all that you do, Derek. So I know we have some faces on here, or non-faces, because I can just see their names, but open it up for questions. Does anyone have a question for Brandon that they would like to ask before we conclude for today? From Dave Securis: in your vast and amazing career, do you have a role model or boss that you looked up to?
I
Okay,
feel
Brandon,
this is
be
a
careful how
self-serving
you
question.
answer.
Yeah, right. No, and this is not a placation answer, I promise. I've been very fortunate, right, to move up pretty quickly in my career, and to be in the role I am today, without question, and not just because he selfishly asked that question. But I get a chance to work with Dave on the WHNLA board. So it's hard for me to ever really be retroactively looking back on Dave, because he's like that guy, the voice in the back of your head who's always there, for good and bad sometimes. But my time at Lake Lawn was very transformational for me. The person I was and the leader I was when I arrived at the property to the individual I am now, very different. A lot of growth there. And that comes from the entire team, not just Dave, I'm sorry. But, Dave has always been there. Even to this day, I can text him and say, hey, what do you think about this? And really great mentor in that side. But yes, Dave Securis, just so my check clears when he sends it, Dave Securis, best GM in Walworth County. Put that, do a Best of Walworth County award, put Dave's number on, or Dave's name on there, and we'll call it good.
Yeah, don't forget. Okay, here's a plug, because people won't remember this. The Walworth County, go on. If you haven't voted for your Best of Walworth County, today I think is the last day for that. So now that you mentioned that, make sure that you go on and vote for all of your surrounding Walworth County businesses throughout. Does anyone else have a question? Thank you, Dave, for that. That really wasn't a question, it was more of a statement, but yes, kind of. Anyone else have a question?
I put one out there, Sarah.
Did you? Okay, thank you, sorry.
I mean, I can elaborate.
Would you
elaborate on it, Brandon? You know, you talked about the collaborations that's needed. You know, you're kind of all over versus just in our little southern Midwestern area. What collaboration or event have you seen out there that maybe us here in Walworth County with Whitewater, Delavan visit that could possibly bring something here that you've seen that was successful? Just so we can plagiarize somebody else's idea. Sorry.
No, it's a great question, and I want to be very careful here because we tread into the political realm a little bit. And I only say that because Walworth County is very similar to Greene County, Missouri, where I'm at today, both in political leadership makeup and kind of belief on, hey, it's okay to host events and do those things, right? So there's an interesting balance there. And I think, Chris, it's a great question because you have to, what works in one market doesn't work with the other just based on that dynamic alone, which is pretty tough to get through. You know, we have some amazing locations. Dubuque, Iowa, we have just an amazingly beautiful historic property, Hotel Julie in Dubuque, not that far from us in Walworth. If you ever get a chance to go out there, check it out. But they are focusing really on, they're finding a couple strong community niches. And what I mean by that is they have some strong ethnic communities based, a number of them based in that city. And they're finding some pieces where maybe sponsorship of an event or marketing of an event that maybe as a chamber or a DMO, we probably wouldn't have gone into that realm yet. That's the biggest thing I can say is, as opposed to somebody coming to you and saying, hey, can you market this? Can you give us money? Can you do these things? Maybe it's a little bit on us. And I say us because we're all part of that tourism family, though yourself and Kelly and Sarah and Derek, you guys have a lot on your plate anyway, but it's going out there and finding maybe some of the not so well-known or not as established type of cultural events. We've seen a huge uptick in that. You're guaranteed attendance just based on a culture gathering, right? Mm-hmm. So it's a different out of the box way of thinking, as opposed to, hey, we're going to do this great children's event. This hotel's going to host it. This chamber is going to sponsor it. We have really found, again, I'm going to go back to hyper local. And regardless of that, we operate a nationwide company. Let's go back to every single hotel has a story. Every chamber has a story. Every city, every village, every area has a story. Let's dig into that. Now in Delavan, the circus thing is it's been used a lot. Let's just say that.
Overused. It's okay. You can say it. It happens to many do. Many do.
See, I'm saying this because Chris asked it, not you, Sarah. So it's okay if I say it to Chris, right?
It's all good. All good.
But there's so many stories outside of the circus available in Delavan, right? There's so many stories in Elkhorn. There's so many stories in Whitewater. It's finding those student groups who help drive our COVID numbers up a little bit because of irresponsibility from time to time. Mm-hmm. But students have passion, and they're going to find projects that probably are a little bit more digital than we're used to, right? And probably have a larger scope. And how do we get in touch with that? How do you get your brand out there in a different manner? Hyper-local is what we're finding. So I know that's not a, hey, Chris, go out and do X, Y, Z and you'll see success. But the concept of that hopefully will at least provide a path for you to start working down and saying, hey, what is out there that we can partner and do that. To all of you watching this on the recording, I'm sorry we missed you today, but you know, support from all of us on the national and state level. If there's anything we can do or anything personally I can do to help your story and to make you successful, please reach out.